Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up in the chat. Cool. All right. The University of Florida Graduate Comics Organization has invited us to consider questions relating to comics as a transformational and liminal medium. For example, are comics more like static objects or more like moving objects? I believe these are not merely academic questions. They are practical questions for parents and educators. Children commonly deal with textual themes of transformation in their stories. Human characters transform into animals, monsters, or superheroes. Furthermore, the way in which children create characters and stories is itself transformative, mixing art materials and story genres in unexpected ways. Very few children could define the words textual and metatextual, but they seem to intuitively know how to tell stories that play with the traditional rules and conventions of comics. During my workshops, children commonly used objects on or nearby the art table as props to tell their story. They might pause drawing in order to dance or physically act out a dynamic scene. They might fold, cut, or rip a piece of paper, not out of frustration, but as part of a story. A character might travel from one side of the paper to the other through a hole in the sheet of paper, for example. Children's comics are often delightful in and of themselves, but I propose that by examining both children's art and their creative process, adults can gain insight of immense value to the creation and study of comics. Before I met Professor Linda Berry, most of my artistic practice was concentrated on photorealistic drawing. I consider my time studying under her to be the single most interesting and transformative event of my artistic career, and working with Berry taught me to never interrupt or ignore children when they are trying to tell you a story. In September 2014, I joined her Making Comics workshop class, where she went by the nickname Professor Bootsy. In addition to organizing opportunities for her class to volunteer as art instructors at the Madison Children's Museum, Berry also encouraged me to apply for the artist in residence position at the Madison Central Library, and her teaching methods and comic drawing exercises were the primary inspiration for my work as an art workshop leader and as a private tutor. Because of this, it is appropriate to begin with a brief summary of Berry's class structure and ideas. In addition, we will discuss academics in the fields of art, education, and psychology who have studied children's art. We will see that Berry's observations on children's art are not isolated, but rather are reinforced by this broader discourse. We will also analyze one comic story I created with a girl we will call Glory, who attended my workshop at the Madison Central Library in 2016. Glory was approximately 6 years old at the time. After some basic character creation exercises, Glory began to confidently create a story on her own that demonstrated both an intelligent understanding of the characters we had created together and a willingness to creatively transform both the characters and the world the characters lived in. What is particularly interesting about this story is that it gives us a clear glimpse into Glory's thinking process. By examining her story, I hope to demonstrate how the creative thinking contained in children's stories can be of value to the practice of making comics and broader comics discourse. Let's begin with our discussion of Linda Berry. An academic may struggle to approach Berry's books unless they understand that Berry's ideas are deeply rooted in the importance of practice itself. Everything about the structure of her class is designed to promote a focused environment for collaborative drawing. This includes using a drawing exercise to take class attendance and Berry's 12 classroom rules, which you can see on the screen. Collaborative drawing games are frequently played in class, usually in the early weeks of the semester. These timed exercises encourage students to draw without fear of making a bad drawing, quote unquote. To further serve this end, Berry asked her college students to attend art workshops for children as her assistants. These drawing jams have a deeper purpose. Berry argues that children's art is of immense value. She writes in Making Comics, "When I work with little kids, I draw alongside them, sometimes copying them, and sometimes just drawing to see what shows up. I don't say much about drawing, and I'm not there as a teacher. To me, it's a language immersion class. Kids speak image." Berry has observed that young children tend to think of a piece of paper and their lines as living things. She writes, "Stories show up on their own when kids draw. The drawing itself propels the story." And this page is from her second book about her experience as a college professor, Making Comics. Berry's work with children parallels with the work of academics in the fields of education and psychology. Professor Sidney D. White of the University of Oregon and psychologist Rhoda Kellogg of the University of Berkeley agree that children's art is of immense value to the study of symbolism and language. Based on her experience as an art educator, Kellogg also argued that allowing children to engage in free drawing should aid their neurological development and hand-eye coordination. For this reason, Kellogg disliked activities which did not entail free drawing. She wrote, "Filling in stencils of any kind is destructive to child development in art." One of the finest resources on intellectual development in children's art is Sylvia Fine's book, Heidi's Horse. Fine collected and analyzed the drawings made by one child, Heidi Schuber, beginning when Heidi was 2 years old. This book clearly demonstrates that children like Heidi engage in a process of learning through art, and that a pattern of intellectual development can be traced through their drawings. Rebecca S. New of the University of North Carolina has argued that children's art activity should be understood as, quote, "the creative and imaginative use of multiple symbolic languages." New argues that art educators can promote children's critical thinking and problem-solving abilities by asking the children open-ended questions. But New warns that an overly hands-on approach undermines these benefits. New writes, "An undue emphasis on the adult role detracts from the clear intent on the part of the children to share what they know they can do." New's view on this topic parallels Barry's, and my personal discussions with Barry on the dilemma between a hands-off approach versus a hands-on approach impacted my own work as a tutor. I once worked with a 3-year-old who liked to draw dinosaurs and was telling me a story about his drawing. When I asked, "Does this dinosaur eat people?" he firmly responded, "No," and he lost interest in the dinosaur story shortly afterwards. Upon reflection, I decided that a much better question might be, what does this dinosaur eat? Using active listening skills and asking questions carefully became vital to my work as a tutor, and the story I created with 6-year-old Glory illustrates the process. Both of us drew on index cards and in our own notebooks as I guided Glory through a character creation exercise. Because I let Glory keep her notebook and all her drawings, this means I only have my notes and illustrations from the workshop. Some of my notes on the early pages were written in my style and vocabulary. I possibly wrote these down later after I concluded working with Glory, so these notes do not necessarily reflect what I said to Glory during the workshop. We began by creating about 12 to 14 characters. We painted loose splotches of watercolor. Once dry, we drew with flare pen on top of the watercolor. I suggested we write one sentence about each of the characters. I did not glue the character cards down until after the workshop concluded, meaning Glory had all the character cards immediately within reach when the storytelling process began. Because index cards are small enough to be tangible, many children will play with them as part of their storytelling process. The description for card 1 reads, "The Doge was an irritable little man, always worried. His speech balloon says, 'Our city is in dire straits.'" This is clearly my adult vocabulary. I either wrote this down after the workshop concluded, or I might have written this down while I was giving Glory quiet time to work on one of her own characters. The description for card 2 reads, "No one liked the Snake Brothers, his most loyal spies." The first speech balloon says, "Turn, brother." The second says, "Yes, brother." The description for card 3 features 2 characters I drew. One is named Germ. The second, Germ's father, was later changed into Germ's sister. The character description reads, "Germ's father," word father's crossed out, "Germ's sister believed that Germ's talents could help the city." Although I wrote this sentence, I'm confident that Glory made the decision to give Germ's sister the name Sister. The description for card 4 reads, "A seahorse named Seahorse was worried too." Card 5 features this handsome gentleman, and the description reads, "He looks tough. He works at making buildings." I can confidently attribute this description to Glory. Card 6 reads, "We don't know if this can talk or not. It's a giraffe dragon with a snake tongue." The next page begins our comic story. First, I drew one of the characters standing next to a window saying, "Worry, worry," on page 1, but I intentionally left the window blank. I thought that if I asked Glory an open-ended question, leaving a blank space would let me draw her idea. From this point on, Glory took on the primary role as narrator, and I avoided interrupting. I made additions only if I sensed Glory wanted me to contribute something. So, page 1. Worry, worry, says the Doge. I asked, what does the character see in the window that's making him so worried? Glory answered, a bad wizard and a wicked witch. She has a witch head with a wizard hat and tiptoe feet. Page 3. She is the friend of the bad wizard, with a head like a paper lantern without crinkles. Glory asked me to draw the wizard with a big, scary hand. Page 4. We see the Snake Brothers are approaching Seahorse the Seahorse. The first says, it's the Seahorse, brother. The second says, I eat a lot. Glory then debated names for the Snake Brothers. The note on this page indicates that she initially gave the name Seahorse to the Seahorse, and the Snake Brothers are named Chicken Bam and Superhero. Page 5. Glory paused and asked me to write down these words. Children often ask you to help them spell words out. Superhero, Batman, super. Then she instructed me to cross out the words hero and man. After doing this, Glory decided what the names for the Snake Brothers were going to be. Super Bat Super and Chicken Bam Super. Page 6. The Snake Brothers actually work for the witch and wizard, and they try to eat the seahorse. Page 7. And all the characters lived happily ever after, no song at the end. All the bad guys are actually good. Now, Glory then paused. It's possible I asked her, why did the bad guys all become good guys? I clearly remember she had a flash of inspiration and explained to me that she wanted to write another story, but that this story would take place before the happily ever after scene. She asked me to write this. Note, read this after reading the next page. Page 8. The seahorse turns into a person. She's a girl, Seahorse Girl. The witch and wizard are her mom and dad. Daughter, says the wizard. Page 10. Germ and his big sister are good. They know the seahorse, but because they are good people, they turn bad at the end. The end. I love this. Okay, now that we know how Glory's story ends, let's re-examine it to see what we can learn about her creative process. Notice how Glory asked me to help her spell certain words. Then she chose the name for the characters by editing and combining the words. Also, notice that Glory made use of characters that I had drawn, but she's willing to alter them as needed. For the ending, Glory not only believes that stories should end with, and all the characters lived happily ever after, she also knows that she doesn't want a song at the end of her story, meaning she knows that many stories end with the characters singing a song. Glory's additional story after page 7 shows that she's willing to amend her plot to include her new idea, and she recognizes that the sequence should be explained to the reader. The seahorse's transformation into Seahorse Girl is what prompts the bad wizard and wicked witch to become good guys. Glory has created a family connection to explain an important change. However, notice how Glory's decision to have the bad guys transform into good guys has consequences. The dramatic revelation and the new ending for the story is that these good characters have become bad. Germ and his big sister were characters we had created and were present on the table in front of Glory. But up to this point, Germ and Sister have not been characters in the story. This is why I didn't glue down the cards immediately, because having immediate access to the cards encouraged Glory to use these characters as needed. Glory instantly identified characters with archetypal traits, such as good guy and bad guy. At the same time, she did not treat these as static or irreversible traits. In Glory's mind, Germ and Sister are clearly good guys, and her statement that they know the seahorse seems to suggest that this is one of the reasons Germ and Sister must be good. However, their transformation into bad guys directly coincides with the bad guys' transformation into good guys. Why? The only answer we are given is a matter-of-fact explanation. Because they are good people, they turn bad at the end. The initial happy ending on page 7 remains the true ending of her story. But Glory has successfully transformed, and all the characters lived happily ever after, into a thrilling cliffhanger. To this day, I sometimes wonder whatever happened to Germ and his big sister's sister. Now, it's hard to tell whether Glory intended this to be a surprise ending. Perhaps she simply felt satisfied with what she had created and wanted to play a new game by telling a new story with different characters. Creator intent is not that easy to interpret. Let's talk a bit about how I handled the workshop to make applications for working with children. The structure of the exercise was designed to teach Glory how to work with watercolor and create characters. These same cards were the building blocks for the less structured creative writing portion of the activity. My suggestion from this experience would be to practice active listening skills while working with children, and to find a balance between participating with children in creating a story and observing children while they tell their story on their own. Participation in story creation is useful because it can help a shy child begin the process, or you can encourage a child who's stuck or frustrated continue their process. However, this approach risks over-involvement if you start telling the story for the child. Observing a child while they tell a story is a different skill. It usually requires writing and drawing as fast as you can to keep up with the flow of the child's idea. I find it helpful to ask questions such as, will you show me how to draw this character? Or tell me more about this if I find it hard to keep up. Observation is useful because it lets you help a child record their ideas, particularly if they struggle with writing. With practice, I've used to learn both styles as needed, creating characters and story ideas to help initiate the process, but stepping back and writing as an observer when a child confidently takes on the role of narrator. Based on practical experience, I'm convinced that there is no substitute to working with actual children if you want to study the creative qualities of their work. Children's willingness to incorporate their own experiences and familiar objects in their comics illustrates a distinct approach to creativity. Its goal is not to demonstrate technical skill in representative drawing, but rather to relate ideas and narratives through a process like play. Children's comic stories tend to defy categorization. Adult artists and writers are more prone to rely on unquestioned rules and assumptions about how art, narratives, and comics should work. When I was a young art student, I frequently struggled with questions like, what can I draw if I don't feel inspired? Or what if this drawing isn't good enough? It was the life experience of working with children in a creative environment that taught me how to approach my own comic art with a spirit of freedom and joy. Children's art involves transformation at every stage of their intellectual development, and their creative work can transform an adult's perspective on art, writing, and the comics medium. By encouraging children to create comics, artists and comic enthusiasts can help promote an appreciation of comics in the broader culture. In addition, we can also deepen our own understanding of comics by paying attention to children's use of materials, performance, and play in storytelling. My hope for the reader and for you, the listener, is that you will apply the lesson I learned from Linda Berry to your own life and artistic practice. Never interrupt or ignore a child when they are trying to tell you a story. Thank you. My bibliography, I don't have a slide for that, but I will be publishing this paper, and I'll be happy to share that with you as needed.